I remember grappling with Christian contradictions in my youth when reading the Bible, when hearing about God, thinking about God, and considering that God, in having created everything by His will, is what I assumed in this contemplation, had created something that made him mad, made him upset, that did what he didn't want it to. And I remember grappling with that problem for hours and hours, just thinking, what am I to do with this? Where am I to go with this? What does this tell us about God? Which is really wonderful because it really planted the seeds for my thinking about God in different ways, about what the will of God meant and about what it has to do with us. It really loosened the structure of my thinking about it. It really loosened the grip that any authority figure may have on me in terms of telling me that they were certain about anything that they could say about God or creation. I'd love to hear about your experience with this subject.
Page 155. The difficulty is that the whole notion of God as universal monarch, King of Kings, is of itself provocative and almost calculated to stir up trouble. So too is the explicit prohibition against eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. This was just asking for disobedience. Page 181. If heaven and hell, and thus also the Lord and the devil, are polar, the reality of the two is the unity which lies implicitly between them. In this light, the war in heaven begins to look like a conspiracy, an immense cosmic drama, an ultimate big act, whereby the universe scares itself stiff for the thrill of it. For it is as if in the far-off beginnings, behind the scenes, before the world drama began, the Lord and the devil had agreed to have a battle, like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, their agreement being their inexpressible, unmanifest, and ineffable unity. Page 185. To discover the secret path is to discover that, as the center implies the circumference, so hell implies heaven, and Satan implies the Lord, and implication is the unity of opposites. Page 188. The whole genius of Christianity is that by requiring its followers to accept impossible challenges, it greatly intensifies human consciousness and self-knowledge. The first and greatest commandment, thou shalt love the Lord thy God, is just such an impossible challenge, for a resolute attempt to obey it reveals the illusory nature of the ego or conscious will as the effective agent in love or in any other deeply spontaneous and creative activity. It is only by trying to love or to be humble with the devil and all his angels in hot pursuit that one discovers the full depth of self-interest and pride involved in the very attempt. I'm looping in a relevant passage today from Book 9, Alan Watts, Psychotherapy East and West. Page 144. Everything ascetic, spiritual, and otherworldly in the ways of liberation is a challenge to the ego, a come-on or judo, inciting the student to prove that his central self is an independent soul agent, which can make itself one-up on the world. The hard discipline of the ways is the total defeat of this ambition, leading to a new identification of one's life and being not with the encapsulated I, but with the organism environment field. The essential hostility of the ego to the physical organism and world is dissolved by a reductio ad absurdum, in which the most skillful means are employed to beguile the egocentric consciousness into consistent action upon its own premises. To what extent, then, are various forms of psychotherapy doing the same thing? However much their avowed objectives may have something else in mind. The problem is outside the scope of this book, but if there's a discrepancy between psychotherapeutic theories and the way in which they actually work, may there not be at least the potentiality of a similarly unconscious effectiveness in Christianity, such that it could become a way of liberation? Jesus' commandment, apparently addressed to the ego, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind," is emphatically a double bind. You must be sincere. If taken as skillful means, upaya, rather than as a positive precept, these words could also be understood as a challenge to the ego and all its counsels of perfection. Jesus was certainly challenging the self-righteousness of the Pharisees, but we seem to have missed the humor of his equal challenge to Christians.
Thank you for joining me in study today. I'm signing off in gratitude.